President Trump's support is positive right now, but it's not as good as it could be. And as the hardships start to mount, the prices go up because you can't get this stuff from other places right away. Well, I think he's going to have some problems here.
Well,
he has to have a strategy. And part of that strategy should be engaging with our former allies, not beating them on the head with tariffs.
You said first, as you know, this week has been dominated by discussion of tariffs and fears of a global trade war. We've certainly got a trade war between the US and China. They're in a serious tit-for-tat battle with the United States raising tariffs on Chinese products, going into the US to 145% and the Chinese on the US imports to 125%. Emeritus Professor Peter Morici is an economist at the University of Maryland and former director of the Office of Economics at the US International Trade Commission. Is on the line. Professor, welcome to the program.
Nice to be with you.
Thank you very much. Just looking at the latest data, US stock markets close in a rally, we see. It's been a tumultuous week, but the Dow went up 600 points today, while the S&P 500 and NASDAQ Composite were up 1.8% and 2% respectively. And no wonder. Trump says there's great optimism in this country and this economy, and the Trump tariffs are a proven economic formula. They think it's going according to plan. What say you?
Well, I don't quite agree with him. I think his tariffs are excessive. We don't need a tariff on the Europeans of 10% or on automobiles with the Europeans and the Canadians and Mexicans. I think that's silly. With regard to China, I think expectations here are wrong. I don't mind the big tariffs on China. I think we ought to decouple, but I end it there. I think we ought to decouple. There's an expectation here that somehow or other they're going to make a deal. And if they do make a deal, it won't be a very good one. It won't solve the problem. China's not going to change its system. And you basically have here an interface problem. And that is the two economies really can't interface on equal terms. And so it's best to just walk away.
When you say decouple, then, Peter, what does that mean? Because I think bilateral trade between the two was worth over $450 billion, isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right. And you can't do that overnight. But what it does mean is greatly reducing the trading relationship to the minimum necessary. Much of what China makes right now can't be sourced elsewhere very easily, but facilities can be built to source that stuff in other countries and here without much problem. It isn't that the Chinese are magical and they have expertise the rest of the world doesn't have. Whatever they've done, we can duplicate in other places.
Okay, well, that requires strategy, that requires good trading relationships, it requires investment and time. And like many Western countries, people in the States, they want things now, and cheap, cheap, cheap. How are the American people going to adapt to this transition?
Well, first of all, it's going to be very hard to have the transition while he's treating other nations as if they were enemies too and combatants in the trade war. Well, he stepped back from his reciprocal tariffs, which weren't very reciprocal. They were just outrageous, to 10% on everybody else and 25% on automobiles and 25% additional on steel. So it's hard to have the transition. And I think that a realization to that will start to kick in, and that people will say, well, wait a minute, where is this ending? What's the end game? What do you want? And I don't know that he has a good answer to that. So with that in mind, I would suggest the Chinese are better situated. They know what they want to do. They want to continue as they are. And President Xi's got his population, his adults, behind him. President Trump's support is positive right now, but it's not as good as it could be. And as the hardships start to mount, the prices go up because you can't get this stuff from other places right away. Well, I think he's going to have some problems here. Well, he has to have a strategy. And part of that strategy should be engaging with our former allies, not beating them on the head with tariffs.
You said he's popular, well, with his base, of course. But I believe that when it comes to national popularity, he really is not quite below the waterline, but he's in the low 40%. And you saw the anger and the frustration in the form of demonstrations all over the country at the weekend.
Oh, wait, hold on. His approval ratings are about as bad as they usually are.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so let's and American presidents lately haven't had great approval ratings
Sure.
overall. All right, the demonstrations you saw are the professional demonstrators on the left. Donald Trump could deliver 5% growth. He could enhance the circumstances of minorities. He could reduce inequality. And the folks on the left would say Donald Trump's all about billionaires and he's a racist.
Well, if they believe that, I mean, he's.
I understand that, and so they'll demonstrate no matter what the economic conditions are. I live in Washington. They're pros at this. This is what they do on weekends. You go to the beach, they demonstrate.
Well, you say that's what they do at the weekend, but I mean, I've been watching and monitoring how some people, members of Trump's base, like farmers, like steelworkers, like others, are reacting to the prospect of higher tariffs or losing their jobs, including people who voted for him. They're taking to TikTok and social media, and many of them are expressing buyer's remorse. Now, it could be that Trump has a master plan and things may turn around in their favor, but, well, they don't feel very confident at this point. And just looking at, you talk of billionaires, BlackRock chief executive Larry Fink saying the US might already be in a recession, and the front page of the FT for Saturday here in the UK and around the world, Fed ready to help markets as Trump tariffs trigger sell-off. Isn't that a demonstration that some very serious people in the United States are very worried about this direction?
Well, wait, just a minute. Okay, slow down.
Okay.
First of all, don't try to cast me as a Trump supporter or an apologist for his policies.
I wasn't.
Okay. Oh, great. Fine. And the thing is that this is not black and white. He has a base. His base is behind him. People I speak with say, well, I guess this is necessary. I went and took my car to the shop, and the mechanic said, who owns this business? He says, well, I guess this is necessary. And I'm hearing a lot of that from Trumpsters. If you are directly affected and you lose your job, then you're going to be angry. If you don't, not so much. As for the recession, we were expecting the economy to grow more slowly at the beginning of the year, for starters. Even before he announced his tariffs, there were a lot of recession indicators that were flashing red. And the banks were they put out probabilities. The probabilities of a recession were going up. I think we have a decent probability of having a recession. His policies make that more likely, make it these conditions worse. But it's not all Trump. It's just that, frankly, the economic recovery here is running out of steam because people borrowed too much money the last year of Joe Biden's presidency.
Oh, right. So you're going to blame this on Biden. I thought
no,
Biden
I didn't say that.
I did
not say that. And if you want to continue to interview me, you can't play the game that way.
Peter, no.
I said they borrowed too much money.
Peter, I thought
didn't say
Biden
Joe made them do it. I didn't say that Joe made them do it.
Okay.
What happened was they got a lot of money during the pandemic from both Trump and Biden.
Yeah.
That was a joint venture, which led to a lot of inflation. But also, while they were locked up, they accumulated a lot of savings. And they gradually ran those down after the economy reopened. Those savings ran out in May of last year. They came on the heels of a lot of inflation. A lot of folks' incomes didn't keep up. And the way they kept on spending was they went into their borrowing mode. They do what Americans always do. They put it on the card. Well, eventually you have to deleverage. Eventually you get to the point where, gee, I can't borrow much more without getting into trouble. So we were starting to get that in January, February, March. Retail sales weren't growing. Some months they were declining. Consumer sentiment was declining by all indications. I'm not blaming anybody.
Sure.
You know, there is some natural cyclical tendencies within the economy that are going to happen no matter who's president. I don't think Joe Biden did anything wrong.
All right, Peter, thank you for that. One more question. Just looking at the front page of the FT again. European travellers avoid America as political turmoil takes toll on tourism. So when you compare March 2025 with March 2024, we've got a drop of 17%, and we know that month on month between, I think, from February this year to March this year, the the number of tourists going in from Canada has dropped by something like 70%. Now, we know that tourism contributed about 2.36 trillion to the US economy in 2023-2024. This is worrying. We're talking about red lights flashing here, aren't we?
Well, yes. I mean, and that's our reward for having Donald Trump, threaten the sovereignty of Canada, saying, why don't you become the 51st state? Or threatening to, pressure poor Denmark about Greenland. So what happens? We have consumer boycotts of American products in supermarkets in Denmark. I'm not surprised at all that this is happening. I think it's very unfortunate for Americans. But again, the people that voted for Donald Trump have no one to blame but themselves.
Yep. All right, Peter, thank you very much. It's been great to talk to you. Thank you very much for our spirited discussion. That's Peter Morici, Emeritus Professor at the University of Maryland and former Director of the Office of Economics at the US International Trade Commission. Henry